Grace sat in her cozy living room, staring at a lifetime's worth of possessions piled high on every shelf and table. The mismatched trinkets, overflowing drawers, and untouched knickknacks whispered stories of memories but screamed chaos. At 72, Grace found herself yearning for something she never thought she'd desire: space, clarity, and simplicity. What if letting go could actually bring her closer to peace and happiness? In this journey, we'll uncover 100 small yet powerful steps to help women like Grace embrace minimalism and reclaim their lives. Let's start with the first step, right where Grace began. 1. Acknowledging the need for change. Grace stood in her kitchen, holding a chipped mug she hadn't used in years. It had been her late husband's favorite, and while it hadn't seen coffee in a decade, its presence felt essential until now. Grace sighed and whispered to herself, "Do I really need this to remember him?" This moment marked the beginning of her journey. The realization that her home, once a sanctuary, had become a cluttered obstacle course was sobering. For many seniors, the challenge lies in acknowledging this truth. It's not easy to admit that our beloved possessions are holding us back, but Grace decided to start small. Grace opened the smallest drawer in her house, a catch-all for random trinkets. She spent just 10 minutes sorting through it, choosing a few items to discard or donate. The act of starting felt empowering, like removing the first brick from a heavy wall. While sorting her clothes, Grace asked herself a simple question: have I used this in the last year? Items that didn't pass this test went into a donation bag. It was a straightforward rule that made decisions easier, cutting through emotional attachment. Grace found that sorting items into clear categories, keep, donate, and discard, removed much of the overwhelm. The piles grew steadily, and she found herself letting go of more than she expected. These small wins reassured her that decluttering wasn't about loss. It was about creating space for what truly mattered. 2. Tackling sentimental attachments. The hardest part of Grace's journey came when she faced her box of keepsakes, her children's old report cards, birthday cards from decades ago, and her mother's lace tablecloth. Each item carried a memory, and letting go felt impossible. But she also knew these things were taking up space, both physically and emotionally. I realized the memories didn't live in the things. They lived in me, Grace shared later. Grace decided to photograph her children's artwork instead of keeping every piece. This allowed her to preserve the memory without keeping stacks of paper. Instead of spreading sentimental items throughout the house, Grace consolidated them into one curated box. This made the memories feel special while keeping the clutter manageable. With her grandson's help, Grace scanned her old photos and stored them on a digital frame. She found joy in seeing the memories play on a loop without the hassle of bulky albums. Through these steps, Grace learned that it wasn't about discarding her past, but honoring it in a way that didn't weigh her down. 3. Setting small, achievable goals. Grace knew that tackling her entire house at once was unrealistic, so she set smaller, daily goals. This approach made the process less daunting and gave her a sense of accomplishment. Grace committed to spending just 10 minutes a day decluttering. Whether it was a drawer, a shelf, or a corner, the manageable time frame kept her from feeling overwhelmed. On busier days, Grace adopted a simpler strategy. She let go of just one item. This might seem small, but over a month, it added up to 30 items and a noticeable difference in her home. Grace invited her neighbor, Helen, to declutter alongside her. They made it a social activity, sharing laughs and encouragement as they tackled their clutter. The company turned a potentially tedious task into an enjoyable experience. These small steps snowballed into meaningful progress. Grace began to see clear spaces emerging, and with them, a sense of freedom she hadn't felt in years. 4. Shifting your mindset. It's about joy, not sacrifice. Grace sat at her kitchen table staring at a half-empty shelf. The silence of her decluttered space was oddly comforting, yet doubts crept in. Am I doing this right? She wondered. This is a question many face when simplifying their lives. The key is understanding that minimalism isn't about giving things up. It's about making room for what truly brings you joy. Grace started by holding each item and asking, "What joy has this brought me?" She thanked her belongings before parting with them. This practice, inspired by decluttering experts, helped her feel gratitude instead of guilt. Grace realized it wasn't about how much she kept, but how meaningful the items were. Her grandmother's teapot, for example, stayed because it brought her daily comfort, while unused dishes were passed on to others who could use them. For every item Grace let go of, she imagined the gift of space and clarity she was giving herself. This reframing turned an emotional hurdle into an empowering step forward. By focusing on joy and gratitude, Grace transformed the process into one of self-discovery rather than sacrifice. 5. Replacing shopping habits with intentional living. Grace chuckled to herself, remembering the years of impulse purchases that filled her closet. It was a thrill at the time, she mused, but now I just feel buried. Breaking free from shopping habits wasn't easy, but Grace found new ways to fill her time and her heart. Grace implemented a 48-hour rule before making any new purchase. This gave her time to consider whether she really needed the item. Often, the urge to buy faded, leaving her wallet and her home lighter. Instead of buying new, Grace took inventory of what she already had. She rediscovered old scarves, family recipes, and even a journal she hadn't written in for years. It felt like shopping in her own home. Grace replaced window shopping trips with nature walks, book club meetings, and phone calls to friends. These activities brought her more joy than anything she could have bought. Grace kept a notebook to document her decluttering journey and any spending she avoided. Seeing her progress in writing gave her a sense of accomplishment and reinforced her new habits. By shifting her focus from acquiring things to nurturing experiences, Grace found a deeper sense of contentment. 6. Letting go of digital clutter. After weeks of sorting through physical belongings, Grace turned her attention to her laptop and phone. She was shocked by the sheer number of files, emails, and apps she'd accumulated. It's no wonder I feel so scattered, she thought. Digital clutter, though less visible, can weigh just as heavily on the mind. Grace started by tackling her overflowing inbox. She unsubscribes from newsletters she no longer reads, cutting her daily emails in half. Grace spent an afternoon creating folders for her digital photos, saving her favorites and deleting duplicates. It was like creating a photo album, but without the mess. Grace realized she was only using a handful of the apps on her phone. She deleted the rest, making her screen simpler and less overwhelming. Grace scheduled unplugged hours every day, using the time to read, garden, or simply relax without distractions. These steps not only cleared up Grace's devices, but also gave her mind a sense of calm and focus. 7. Simplifying your daily routines, a recipe for peace. Grace noticed something amazing as her spaces became clearer. Her days felt less chaotic. I don't feel as rushed anymore, she shared, sipping her morning tea. Simplifying her daily routines became her next focus, and the results were transformative. Grace started with her wardrobe. She curated a capsule wardrobe of her favorite, most versatile pieces, eliminating decision fatigue. Now, getting dressed in the morning was quick and stress-free. Grace committed to a weekly meal plan, listing 3 breakfast options, 3 lunches, and 3 dinners. She rotated them, making grocery shopping and cooking simpler. It also reduced waste, which made her feel proud. Instead of running errands every day, Grace designated one day for groceries, appointments, and other chores. It saved time, energy, and gas. A triple win. Grace set up automatic bill payments and reminders for medications, giving her more mental space to enjoy her hobbies and family. Each small change made Grace's life more predictable and peaceful, proving that simplifying routines isn't just practical, it's liberating. 8. Creating a calm, minimalist living space. One evening, Grace lit a candle and sat in her newly decluttered living room. The quiet calm of her surroundings felt like a deep breath after years of noise. She realized that creating a minimalist environment wasn't just about removing things, it was about setting the tone for a peaceful life. Grace tackled her coffee table and kitchen counters, leaving only one or two meaningful items on display. The result? A sense of order and openness that made her smile every time she walked into the room. Inspired by a minimalist blog, Grace added neutral pillow covers and light curtains. The soft palette gave her space a serene and cohesive look. Grace brought in a few small plants, like a pothos and a peace lily. Caring for them became a relaxing ritual, and they added a touch of life to her minimalist aesthetic. Grace created a cozy corner with a chair, a blanket, and her favorite books. This became her sanctuary for quiet reading or meditation. By simplifying her living space, Grace discovered how her environment could reflect her newfound clarity and calm. 9. Prioritizing what truly matters. As Grace progressed, she began to see minimalism as more than just decluttering her physical space. It was also about identifying what mattered most in her life, her relationships, passions, and well-being. Grace reviewed her calendar and realized she was attending events out of obligation rather than joy. She started saying no to activities that didn't align with her values, freeing up time for her family and close friends. With fewer distractions, Grace prioritized phone calls and visits with her children and grandchildren. She even planned a regular family tea time on Sunday afternoons, which became a cherished tradition. Grace dusted off her watercolor set and began painting again, a hobby she hadn't enjoyed in years. It brought her immense satisfaction and reminded her of the joy of creativity. Grace started a simple self-care routine, including stretching, walking in the park, and journaling. These small acts nurtured her body and mind, helping her feel balanced and refreshed. Grace's journey taught her that minimalism wasn't about living with less. It was about living with intention and making space for what truly enriched her life. 10. Overcoming emotional hurdles in the decluttering process. Grace reached a point in her journey where she hit an emotional roadblock. She stood in front of an old box filled with letters and mementos, her hands trembling slightly as memories washed over her. Letting go wasn't just about objects. It was about releasing a part of herself. Grace allowed herself to sit with her feelings, acknowledging the memories attached to her belongings. She learned that it's okay to feel sadness while decluttering. It's part of the healing process. Grace found ways to preserve the sentiment without holding on to everything. She framed one of her favorite letters from her late husband and let the rest go. "I still have the memory, but now it feels more special," she said. When Grace felt overwhelmed, she paused and stepped away. She reminded herself that this journey wasn't a race. It was about progress, not perfection. Grace shared her feelings with her best friend, Helen. Talking through her emotions helped her feel supported and less alone in the process. 11. Building a support network for encouragement. Grace realized she didn't have to navigate this journey alone. By sharing her goals with her family and friends, she found a sense of community that motivated her to keep going. Grace invited her daughter to help her sort through keepsakes. Together, they shared laughs, shed a few tears, and reminisced about cherished memories. The process strengthened their bond. Grace discovered an online minimalist community for seniors. Sharing her progress and hearing others' stories made her feel inspired and validated. Grace and Helen celebrated their progress over tea, reflecting on how far they'd come. Acknowledging achievements made the journey feel lighter and more joyful. Grace read books and watched videos about minimalism, drawing motivation from people who had walked similar paths. Seeing their transformations reminded her of her own potential. Through her support network, Grace learned that sharing her journey enriched it, making her feel connected and empowered. 12. Tackling lingering clutter with confidence. By now, Grace's home looked significantly different, but she knew there were still pockets of clutter she'd been avoiding. These were the trouble spots she needed to face head-on. Grace made a list of the remaining clutter zones: her attic, garage, and that one drawer in the guest room. Breaking it into smaller tasks helped her feel less overwhelmed. For each space, Grace used 4 boxes: keep, donate, sell, and discard. This method added structure to her process and kept her moving forward. Grace set a timer for 20 minutes and challenged herself to work on one area without distractions. The sense of urgency helped her stay focused. When Grace finished clearing her garage, she stood in the wide open space and felt a wave of pride. "This is what freedom feels like," she thought with a smile. Each time Grace conquered a lingering clutter zone, she felt her confidence grow. What once seemed impossible now felt achievable, reinforcing her belief in the power of small, intentional steps. 13. Sustaining simplicity, a minimalist routine for the long haul. Grace leaned back in her favorite chair, basking in the serenity of her uncluttered home. The journey had been transformative, but she knew the real challenge lay ahead: maintaining her minimalist lifestyle. How could she ensure this newfound peace lasted? Grace set aside the first Sunday of every month for a quick home review. She spent an hour evaluating her spaces, discarding anything that no longer served her. It became a routine she looked forward to, like spring cleaning, but without the overwhelm. Grace decided that every time she brought something new into her home, she would let go of a similar item. This simple rule prevented clutter from creeping back in and kept her belongings manageable. Grace placed a note on her fridge: "I simplified to make space for joy." Every time she felt tempted to accumulate, the reminder brought her back to her purpose. Grace treated herself to a quiet cup of tea or a walk in the park after maintaining her monthly decluttering habit. The rewards reminded her how fulfilling it felt to live with less. Sustaining simplicity became second nature, proving that minimalism wasn't just a phase for Grace. It was a lifestyle shift that empowered her daily. 14. Sharing the joy of minimalism with others. As Grace experienced the profound benefits of minimalism, she felt an urge to share her journey. "If this can bring me so much peace," she thought, "imagine what it could do for others." Grace didn't preach about her minimalist lifestyle. Instead, she let her transformation speak for itself. Friends and family noticed the calm she radiated and began asking her about it. Grace found herself recounting moments of joy, like the day she rediscovered an old journal or created her cozy reading nook. These stories resonated with others, sparking curiosity without judgment. When her neighbor Helen expressed interest in decluttering, Grace offered to help with the first step. Together, they sorted Helen's bookshelf, sharing laughs and stories along the way. Grace organized a small gathering where friends exchanged items they no longer needed. It became a fun, lighthearted way to let go and give new life to old belongings. 15. Embracing the emotional rewards of minimalism. As Grace reflected on her journey, she realized minimalism wasn't just about physical spaces. It was about emotional transformation. She felt lighter, freer, and more in tune with herself. The rewards were far greater than she ever imagined. Grace began her morning sitting by her window with a cup of tea, soaking in the peace of her simplified surroundings. The absence of clutter created a stillness that nurtured her soul. With less to manage, Grace spent more time with her grandchildren, painting with them and sharing stories. These moments became the highlights of her days. Donating unused items brought Grace immense satisfaction. Knowing her belongings were helping others made her feel connected to her community in a meaningful way. Grace loved the ease of finding exactly what she needed without rummaging through piles. The clarity of her home mirrored the clarity in her mind. The emotional rewards of minimalism solidified Grace's belief that her journey was one of self-care and renewal. Her simplified life wasn't just about fewer things. It was about more joy, connection, and purpose. So what's the verdict? Ready to say goodbye to the clutter and hello to a life that feels like a deep breath? Remember, Grace didn't just declutter her home. She decluttered her mind, her time, and her soul. Now it's your turn. Start small, keep it fun, and hey, don't forget to share your progress in the comments. Let's cheer each other on. After all, minimalism is better with a buddy.